Welcome back to the channel. Today's story is one you'll remember long after watching, because it shows how life can twist in ways no one expects. Imagine loving someone deeply, building a life together, only to be abandoned for something you cannot control. That's exactly what happened to Adaora. Adaora married Chike with hope in her heart, dreaming of a home filled with laughter and children. For 3 years, she gave her best, caring for the house, supporting her husband, always patient with his moods. But the whispers started quietly at first, coming from Chike's friends and family. "When will she give you children?" they asked. And Chike listened, not to her love, but to the pressure around him. At first, he was patient, holding Adaora's hand and promising, "It will happen in time." She believed him. But as months passed and years lingered without a child, Chike's patience thinned. He began noticing every little mistake she made, every time she seemed tired or worried. Adaora, unaware of how fast things were slipping, continued trying to please him, cooking his favorite meals, smiling when he walked through the door, never knowing that his heart was drifting away. One evening, Chike returned from a friend's wedding, where a new woman had caught his attention. She was young, wealthy, and expecting. That night, he told Adaora he was leaving, not because she had done anything wrong, but because she could not give him the one thing he wanted most, a child. Adaora felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. The home she had built with love turned cold. Chike packed his bags without a backward glance, leaving Adaora stunned, heartbroken, and alone. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. Adaora would soon discover that life has a way of surprising even those who think they've lost everything. The story of her heartbreak is only the beginning, and what happens next will change her life forever. Adaora stayed on that mat for a long while, watching Chike disappear down the dusty path. At first, she couldn't think beyond the sharp ache in her chest. Her neighbors whispered behind closed doors, some offering sympathy, others judging silently. She felt the sting of betrayal, but deep down, she knew she couldn't stay trapped in sorrow forever. Slowly, she rose, brushing the dust from her skirt. She returned to her small home, the walls now echoing emptiness where laughter used to live. Adaora began taking small steps, cleaning her home, tending her tiny garden, speaking to the children in the neighborhood she sometimes helped with. These acts felt ordinary, but they gave her purpose. Each day, she reminded herself that life would not end just because Chike had chosen another path. One afternoon, while carrying water from the well, Adaora noticed a man struggling to fix a bicycle. He was older, calm, and had a gentle smile that put her at ease. She went over, offering help. He accepted, and they worked together, laughing softly at the stubborn chain that refused to fit. His name was Obinna, a quiet man who owned a small shop in the village. Their conversation was simple, ordinary even, but Adaora felt a lightness she hadn't felt in months. Days turned into weeks, and Adaora found herself talking to Obinna more often. He listened when she spoke, asked about her day, and treated her with respect that felt entirely new. She didn't expect romance, not yet, but she began to notice her own laughter returning. The neighbors watched, curious, some whispering that Adaora was finding her strength again. She didn't care. After Chike's betrayal, the world had shrunk, and now she was slowly reclaiming it. Meanwhile, Chike's new life was far from perfect. The woman he had rushed into marriage with had expectations he hadn't considered, and soon cracks began to show. He called Adaora once, casually, as if checking an old habit. Adaora, calm and collected, listened quietly, then hung up. She realized that her heart, though scarred, was no longer entirely his to control. Adaora's days became filled with small victories, tending her garden, helping children, and slowly building a life that was hers alone. Fate was quietly shifting, setting the stage for events neither Chike nor she could yet imagine. Weeks passed, and Adaora's life began to hum with quiet stability. She no longer spent her days in despair. Instead, she found comfort in small routines and the gentle presence of Obinna. He would stop by her home, sometimes carrying a small gift from his shop or just bringing news from the village. His laughter was steady and warm, and Adaora realized she hadn't noticed how empty her heart had felt until now. Chike, on the other hand, was starting to feel the cracks in his hurried decisions. His new wife demanded luxuries he had not accounted for, her expectations clashing with his reality. Every day, he found himself frustrated, realizing that what he thought would be effortless satisfaction had turned into constant conflict. He tried calling Adaora again, a mixture of curiosity and guilt driving him. This time, Adaora refused to answer. She knew that her heart had grown cautious, and she was no longer the same woman he had left behind. One morning, while Adaora tended her small garden, a letter arrived from a nearby city. It was an invitation to a women's cooperative program, a chance for her to learn new skills and earn income for herself. The news filled her with excitement. This was a new chapter, a world she hadn't dared enter before. With Obina's encouragement, she decided to attend, stepping beyond the boundaries of the village she had always known. The cooperative was bustling with energy. Women from surrounding areas shared stories of struggle and triumph. Adaora felt alive among them, absorbing lessons, laughing at small jokes, and slowly gaining confidence. She realized that her value wasn't tied to children or a husband's approval, it was tied to her own strength, her resilience, and her capacity to rebuild. Back in the village, Chike started hearing rumors of Adaora's growing independence. Villagers whispered about her smiling more, speaking boldly, and even managing small trades. Pride mixed with regret in him, but he refused to admit that he had underestimated her. Every mention of her success pricked at his ego, leaving him restless in his new life. Meanwhile, Adaora met new challenges at the cooperative, learning skills she had never imagined mastering. She began making crafts, small textiles, and even teaching younger women how to handle their own businesses. Each success was a quiet victory, a small reclaiming of the life Chike had tried to steal. The woman who had been left broken was slowly becoming unstoppable, and fate was quietly weaving its intricate plan. As Adaora thrived at the cooperative, her confidence grew in ways even she hadn't expected. Each morning, she walked with purpose, greeting neighbors with a smile that no longer wavered under judgment. The skills she was learning, weaving, small trade, organizing community events, made her feel alive. For the first time since Chike had left, she felt truly free. Obina remained a quiet presence, always respectful, never overbearing. He listened to her frustrations, celebrated her achievements, and offered advice when she asked. Adaora found herself looking forward to their conversations, appreciating how simple, kind, and understanding he was. Slowly, the idea of building a new life without Chike became not just imaginable, but desirable. Meanwhile, Chike's new marriage was unraveling faster than he had anticipated. His wife's lavish expectations collided with reality, and his patience wore thin. He began regretting the rash decision to leave Adaora, though he never admitted it aloud. He still saw her name in village gossip, sometimes mentioned with admiration, sometimes in envy, and it gnawed at him. The more he heard, the more he realized he had underestimated the woman he had abandoned. One evening, while Adaora returned from the cooperative carrying a basket of handmade goods, she noticed a commotion near her home. A small crowd had gathered around Chike, who had returned to the village briefly for business. Some villagers were whispering, others simply staring. Chike's eyes met Adaora's from a distance. There was a flicker of recognition, mixed with hesitation. Adaora's heart didn't race this time. Instead, she felt calm, observing him as she walked past, carrying herself with the dignity he had once ignored. Chike tried to approach her, speaking her name softly, but Adaora only paused briefly, nodding politely before moving on. The villagers noticed, murmuring among themselves, sensing the shift in power between the two. Adaora's confidence and independence now spoke louder than the years she had spent in heartbreak. Back at her home, she unpacked her basket and smiled at the small successes it contained. Every thread woven, every piece sold, every skill learned was a victory. She realized she had gained something Chaik could never take away: self-respect and resilience. Fate, it seemed, had other plans for both of them, weaving lessons in unexpected ways. Life was beginning to take on a rhythm that Adora could finally call her own. Each morning, she woke with purpose, ready to learn, to create, to grow. The cooperative had expanded her world beyond the village, connecting her with women from neighboring communities. She traded goods, shared ideas, and slowly began earning enough to support herself. The independence she had once thought impossible now felt natural. Obina continued to be her quiet anchor. He never rushed her, never demanded attention. Instead, he offered encouragement, helping Adora believe in her own strength. Sometimes, they would sit on her small mat outside her house in the evenings, discussing everything from village politics to the small joys of daily life. Adora began to realize that happiness didn't always need grand gestures. Sometimes, it was the steady presence of someone who truly cared. Meanwhile, Chaik's frustration deepened. His new marriage was unraveling faster than he anticipated. Every day brought arguments over money, expectations, and plans he couldn't satisfy. The woman he had married for status and the promise of children began showing her true colors, leaving him feeling trapped and foolish. Chaik had imagined that leaving Adora would solve all his problems, but instead, it had created a life far more complicated than the one he had abandoned. One morning, a letter arrived for Adora from a city entrepreneur who had heard of her handiwork. The note offered her the chance to sell her crafts in a larger market outside the village. This was more than just a small opportunity, it was a doorway to independence on a scale she had never dreamed of. Adora's heart raced, not with fear, but with excitement. Finally, her talent could be recognized beyond the dusty paths of her village. Obina noticed her excitement and smiled quietly. "This is your chance," he said softly. "Take it. You've earned every bit of it." Adora nodded, realizing that she had spent too long waiting for Chaik to see her worth. She would not wait any longer, not for him, not for anyone. As she prepared to leave for the city market, word reached Chaik. Villagers mentioned her growing reputation, her rising independence, and the respect she was earning. A mix of jealousy and regret settled in him. For the first time, Chaik understood that Adora's life was moving forward, and he had no part in it. The woman he had discarded was no longer the same. She was stronger, wiser, and ready for anything fate might throw her way. Adora arrived in the city market with her basket of handmade crafts, her heart pounding with a mixture of nerves and excitement. The noise, the colors, the movement, it was nothing like the quiet village paths she had known. Yet, she felt alive. Each stall, each customer, each small interaction reminded her that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. Her skills immediately caught attention. People admired the precision of her weaving, the vibrancy of her textiles, and the care she put into every piece. Adora smiled politely, demonstrating how the products were made, explaining the stories behind each design. Customers began to buy, first one, then several, and by the end of the day, her basket was nearly empty. She counted her earnings with amazement, more than she had ever held in her hands before. Obina had come with her, carrying a smaller load and helping wherever he could. He stayed in the background, proud but unobtrusive, letting Adora shine on her own. She felt a quiet gratitude for his steady presence, knowing he had believed in her when she had doubted herself. Back in the village, news of Adora's success traveled fast. Villagers whispered about her growing reputation, about how she had turned heartbreak into opportunity. Even Chaik heard the stories. He was in town on business when he overheard merchants speaking of a skilled young woman from his village who was selling her crafts across the city market. His chest tightened. He hadn't imagined Adora achieving this level of independence, this level of success, without him. As days passed, Adora became a regular in the market. She learned to negotiate, to network, and even to mentor other women who were just beginning to sell their crafts. Her confidence grew with each transaction, each compliment, each small victory. She realized that the world was bigger than she had ever known and that her worth was never dependent on Chike or anyone else. One evening, after a long day at the market, Adewora and Obinna sat on the steps outside her small rented room. The city lights flickered around them. She laughed softly, recounting a humorous incident with a customer, and Obinna smiled, feeling the warmth of her spirit returning stronger than ever. Fate had tested her, broken her heart, but it had also guided her to this moment, independent, capable, and ready for the future she was creating herself. Back in the village, Chike couldn't shake the news of Adewora's success. Every conversation he overheard, every compliment given to her, gnawed at him. The woman he had abandoned for being childless was thriving without him, building a life he could no longer control. He felt anger, jealousy, and a quiet regret that he refused to admit aloud. Determined to remind himself of his past decisions, Chike returned to the village, trying to maintain a sense of superiority. Yet, the villagers' whispers and subtle looks reminded him of how far Adewora had risen. They spoke of her independence, her talent, and the way she carried herself with dignity despite the heartbreak he had caused. Each word was like a mirror, reflecting his own failure back at him. Meanwhile, Adewora continued her days in the city market, growing stronger and more confident with every passing moment. She began receiving larger orders, connecting with people who appreciated her work and treated her with respect. Each sale was more than just income, it was a reminder of her worth and of how far she had come. She smiled, realizing that the woman Chike had left behind was no longer the same. She was resilient, capable, and unshakable. One afternoon, while packaging a large order for delivery, a letter arrived. It was from a prestigious artisan exhibition in the city, inviting her to showcase her crafts. Her heart raced. This was the kind of opportunity that could change her life forever, and she understood immediately that it was a direct result of her perseverance and determination. Obinna noticed the excitement in her eyes and gently said, "You've earned this, Adewora. Fate has a way of rewarding patience and strength." She nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. For the first time, she realized that life had bigger plans for her than she had ever imagined, far beyond the village or even the market. Chike, meanwhile, tried to gather information about her new opportunities. He listened to villagers, asked questions, and even made excuses to visit the market. Yet, every time he approached, Adewora was surrounded by customers or friends who respected her independence. His attempts to interfere or impress her fell flat. She acknowledged him politely if he spoke but never allowed herself to be affected. The man who once held her heart now watched from a distance, powerless to touch the life she was building. Adewora had learned a powerful lesson: life does not bend to those who abandon love or take it for granted. She was moving forward, and fate was on her side. The day of the artisan exhibition arrived, and Adewora felt a mixture of nerves and excitement. The hall was filled with colorful displays, each table showcasing the work of talented women from across the region. She set up her crafts carefully, making sure each piece told its story, of resilience, creativity, and dedication. Obinna had accompanied her, quietly offering support and encouragement. "You belong here," he said softly, smiling. "Don't let anything shake your confidence." Adewora took a deep breath, nodding. For months, she had worked tirelessly to reach this point, and she was ready to shine. As the exhibition began, people crowded around her table. They admired her weaving, commented on the care in her embroidery, and asked questions about her techniques. Each compliment felt like a small victory, a recognition of all she had endured and overcome. Adewora smiled politely, answering questions and sharing her story without revealing the depth of her past heartbreak. Unbeknownst to her, Chike had heard about the exhibition and had come quietly to see her. He slipped into the hall, hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman he had abandoned. When he saw her, standing confidently among admirers, a wave of regret and envy washed over him. Adewora was radiant, her spirit unbroken, and for the first time, he realized he had lost something truly irreplaceable. Obina noticed Chike standing in the distance and subtly placed a hand on Adaora's shoulder. She glanced at him, understanding without words. She felt a calm strength rise within her. This was her moment, and she would not let anyone, not even the man who had once held her heart, diminish it. Throughout the day, orders for Adaora's crafts poured in. Visitors asked about long-term commissions, potential collaborations, and ways to showcase her work further. Each interaction solidified her growing independence and her reputation as a skilled artisan. The woman Chike had dismissed for being childless had become someone respected and admired for her talent, resilience, and grace. By the end of the exhibition, Adaora and Obina packed the remaining crafts, smiling at the success they had achieved. As they left, Chike lingered behind, watching silently. He understood, finally, that no apology or gesture could change the path she had chosen. Fate had given Adaora a second chance at life, one that he could no longer influence. After the exhibition, Adaora's life began to change in ways she had only dreamed of. Orders from across the region flowed in, and her name became known as a symbol of skill and determination. She traveled occasionally to deliver her crafts, meet clients, and explore new opportunities. Every step reminded her that she was building a life on her own terms, free from the shadow of her past. Obina remained a steady presence, quietly supportive, never rushing her or expecting anything beyond her comfort. Adaora appreciated him more each day, not because he filled a void, but because he respected her space while celebrating her successes. She laughed more freely, slept more peacefully, and no longer allowed the echoes of heartbreak to weigh her down. Back in the village, Chike's jealousy had grown unbearable. He could not stop hearing about her accomplishments, her growing reputation, and the admiration she inspired. Every mention felt like a reminder of what he had thrown away. He tried reaching out again, this time under the guise of friendship, hoping to rekindle some connection. Adaora, however, remained polite but distant, her eyes calm and unwavering. She had learned to guard her heart, to value herself above the approval of someone who once left her broken. One afternoon, Chike came to the village in person, determined to see her and speak. He approached cautiously, aware of the whispers and the respect she now commanded. Adaora greeted him with a measured nod, her expression steady. He tried to speak, fumbling through apologies and explanations, but she listened silently. In that moment, he saw her not as the woman he had dismissed, but as someone untouchable by his regrets. Adaora finally spoke, her voice calm and firm. "I have built my life, Chike. My happiness does not depend on you. I have moved forward, and you should too." Her words were not harsh, but they carried the weight of someone who had endured, learned, and risen above betrayal. Chike understood. She had grown stronger while he remained trapped by his own choices. Walking away, Adaora felt a quiet triumph, knowing that fate had delivered her justice not through revenge, but through life itself. She had been abandoned, yet she emerged victorious, her spirit intact, her future bright. Chike, left in reflection, realized that he had lost the woman he once took for granted, and there was no turning back. Adaora's life had transformed completely. The woman who had once sat heartbroken on a mat outside her small home now walked with confidence and purpose. Her crafts had become sought after across towns, and her reputation as a skilled, resilient woman spread far beyond the village. Every order, every compliment, every small success was a reminder of how far she had come. Obina, always quietly supportive, had become more than a friend. Together, they shared laughter, ideas, and dreams for the future. He never rushed her, never pressured her. He simply stood beside her, allowing her to shine while offering a gentle, steady presence. Adaora felt a warmth and peace she had never known in her marriage to Chike. Chike, on the other hand, was no longer part of her world. He had tried in vain to reconnect, to apologize, to remind her of their past. Each attempt only confirmed what she already knew. Her life did not depend on him, and her happiness had been reclaimed through her own courage and perseverance. Villagers still whispered about him, noting how the woman he abandoned had risen above heartbreak while he struggled with regret. One morning, as Adaora prepared her goods for another market trip, she paused and looked around her home. The walls, once empty and silent, now reflected warmth, laughter, and a life built on determination. She thought of the journey, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the quiet moments of despair, and realized that every step had led her here. Fate had delivered its lessons, but she had chosen how to respond. Obinna approached, handing her a small cup of tea. She smiled at him, the gesture simple yet full of meaning. "Thank you for believing in me," she said softly. He smiled back, understanding that the bond they shared was built on respect, patience, and shared triumphs. As Adaora stepped outside to greet her day, she felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. She had endured betrayal, heartbreak, and doubt, yet she had emerged stronger, independent, and full of hope. Fate had indeed taken a hand in her story, but it was her resilience, her courage, and her unwavering spirit that had turned tragedy into triumph. And so, Adaora's journey became a story whispered across the village and beyond, a reminder that those who abandon love may never understand the strength it creates, and that life has a way of rewarding those who persevere.